buzzed by a hummingbird. Oh my God. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another perfect start of Beautiful Book Geeks. Today, I'm just going to go ahead and get this out of the way. We talk about him so much.
Circle. Beautiful Book Geeks.
As Amanda's computer has just told you, we have started. And today, our special guest is Joshua Robertson. Say hi, Josh.
Hey, everybody. You finally dragged me aboard.
I did. He came on to defend himself since we have been lambasting him basically since we started.
Maybe
it's not like we don't talk about you almost every single episode.
Maybe a little too much. Well, I love you guys. I've known you guys forever.
And we love you too. Yep.
Just he has so many books that he's written. It takes a while to cover them all.
Do what?
He's written so many books, it takes a while to cover them all.
Really,
have we even had 9 episodes?
In great books. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. There's still more to come. I'm trying to write faster. I feel like I don't have enough time in a week anymore.
Well, you've been quite the busy little beaver doing all the cons and stuff. Why don't you tell the fans about that?
We have been. I set the goal last year live on one of Joe Compton's episodes for Go Indie Now. And I said that I wanted to go and attend 40 cons this year through 2018. And so far, we have attended 17 cons, and we have 10 more scheduled so far. So at this rate, I think we might actually surpass 40 cons, but I think we're definitely going to hit our mark.
That just exhausts me hearing about it. I've done cons. I know how exhausting they are.
Lillian and I were actually talking this morning. For those that don't know, Lillian Oak is my wife. But her and I were talking this morning about just how much fun it is that we're always doing something, like just getting out and talking with fans and talking books and making connections with people that go to cons, all these really talented artists and entrepreneurs. It's really a fascinating experience. And I would have never went and gone that route without Joe Compton telling me that's what I needed to do. He was like, dude, you have all these books published, full series done. Why are you not at cons? Well, I was intimidated. I had no idea what that actually entailed. But since I've started doing them, I never want to go back. I absolutely love them.
Oh, absolutely. I've met amazing authors at conventions, and I haven't had all the other fun people that you've met, but I'm kind of limited to the Salt Lake area. And for some reason, a lot of people don't want to come to Salt Lake because, you know, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere.
I actually want to go to the Salt Lake City Con, but it's so far away. I've had several people ask me to come out there because I mean, you live out there, but I know lots of people that live out that way.
And you need to come because it is huge and it is absolutely amazing. And you and Lillian have a place to stay if you come, because I would totally put you guys up in our guest room.
Yeah, that would be totally awesome. That's really a big piece of it, though. I mean, anywhere we go, we typically have to drive, and we're getting to a place now that we're almost going to have to get a trailer to start going to cons, because taking as many books as we do for how many we sell, it's just it weighs down our vehicle so much. It's hard on the vehicle, and so it's
sold out at your last con in Savannah, right? Before the event even ended.
Yeah, her and I have sold out, I think, now at 3 cons this year.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's been crazy. One of them, we were actually 2 hours away from home, and we sold out on day 1, and we had to drive back and get more books and bring them back.
Wow.
And that eats up a lot of gas, especially if you're not close to home.
It does. But yeah, Salt Lake City would be awesome. I mean, we had people ask us to come out to like Texas as well. But to drive that far with books is exhausting. I mean, you have hotels all along the way. Texas alone is a 16-hour drive.
Well, but the nice thing about Texas, and I have family down in Texas, and I want to do cons down there in the future. But the nice thing about Texas is that there's a bunch of cons all in the area, all within like a 2-week period. So you could hit each con each weekend and maybe have a week off in between, you know, whatever. But you can't do that in Salt Lake because there's like 6 cons in Salt Lake all year long.
Yeah, you're right.
The one in Denver is a month after the one here. And then the one in Seattle, which is, you know, one of the next closest ones, is like 4 months after the one here. And you're just like, how do you schedule like what you're doing, going to a con every weekend when everything is so far away out here. It's really hard.
Which, I mean, there are places now like the one in Philly we're going to. We're actually bringing our own books up there. I think we're bringing close to 300 books to this con, but they allow you to ship them in advance and have them there waiting for you when you get there, which is something that we're going to do with some of the further away cons. But some cons are a crapshoot, and you don't actually know how they're going to go, and you haven't attended them before. So if you ship 300 books to a con and you don't sell a lot, that's a lot of books to try to find a way to get back home again.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, but overall, it's a great experience.
I can ride home on the books.
But overall, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to go and attend them and see people. And we've connected with a lot of fans. And like we went to Pittsburgh last month, and it was crazy seeing how many fans we actually had up there. People who knew exactly who we were. They'd already read some of our books. They were looking to buy the next one. And that was kind of humbling, to be honest with you, because we didn't really think that we were getting to that place where people could recognize the name and recognize the brand. But people were like, oh yeah, I know these books. I've read these. This is about the two brothers who killed a god type of thing. They're like, I needed the next one. I was hoping you were going to be here.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is definitely great feeling. When you have fans that are looking forward to you, not just recruiting new fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. See, I knew you were going to be big, but it's still great to hear.
I don't consider myself big at all, but I feel like I'm at least getting to a place that the brand and the name is getting recognized, and that's a nice feeling.
And hopefully you're going to be launching even bigger soon, right?
I do hope so. We have a lot of things coming down the pipe. For one, JC and I have been working on a card game that him and I are beta testing right now. And so it'll be the Blood of Dragons card game, which is for about 2 to 4 players and only takes about 30 minutes to play the game. I imagine a lot of folks will probably end up turning it into a drinking game, which that's very easily possible. Yeah,
that's my plan.
It says instead of killing your opponents, you just try to drink them under the table. We have several more books coming out. We're working on lots of different series. Of course, there's the cons going on. And then, of course, now we're looking at hopefully pitching to some companies and getting Thrice 9 Legends moved to another media platform, whether that be the big screen or a regular original television series.
No offense, I'm really hoping for a TV series.
I personally
you miss a lot in movies. So I would much rather have it be, a nice, long, extended TV series.
I agree. And JC and I are both pretty open to what folks want to do with Thrice 9 Legends, but we definitely see a TV series allowing us to show more than what you even get in the books. Because I know the books, because I write third person limited, they are kind of centered on the core characters and what the core characters are experiencing through the novel. But there is so much more behind the scenes with the characters that you don't see that I would like to bring to the front line in a series on television.
That would be so awesome. And then it's really cool because a lot of times when you're making a movie, you're getting less than, or even with a lot of the book TV series, you're getting less than you got in the original. But then Walking Dead, they did a really good job of, there's a lot they did wrong, but
depending on who you talk to.
of getting that more in detailed piece of the stories of the characters that you didn't get in the comics. So yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun characters there too. That one of my favorites, which is Malili Kluk. I really like Malili, and I would like to really blow her up a little bit, especially in Anarfell, to show more of that side of the family. Now, I know some of you guys have already read, or some of you ladies have already read Highborn Longwalker, so you get a little bit more of her there. But she was a big favorite of JC's and mine in the early days, and she just didn't get enough screen time in Anarfell like we wanted her to.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I absolutely love Malili. She's kind of a badass, actually, in a delicate way.
Yep. Yeah, I know Rebekah's finished Highborn. I don't know if you've actually gotten to Highborn yet, Heidi.
No, I haven't. I'm trying to work in the logical order according to Rebekah.
That's a wise thing. Well, I had a reader actually message me the other day and tell me that they thought that Highborn was probably my best work yet. So that really made me feel good because I haven't had a lot of feedback on it yet. So I was glad to hear that.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love getting good feedback from readers.
I'm running through all the books in my head now, and I have to say, yeah, I think so. Highborn was probably the absolute best.
That's good to know. That means that I'm getting better because it's the last one I've published, which is always my goal. I always want to make the next book better than the last.
Actually, I think, yeah, the progression of the books, I'm running them through my head now in non-chronological order, but in written order. And yeah, each book has gotten better. I still adore Maharia, though.
Well, Maharia is actually my favorite of the 3 in the series, but most readers will tell me they like Dying Dare the best.
Maharia is my favorite of all of them.
I have to say I like Maharia better. I mean, it made me mad. I threw it across the room. I was very, very upset. But it was, you know, that's the one that I not over. But yeah, I haven't had that kind of an emotional connection to a book in a really long time.
I'm glad to hear that. I know Maharia was actually pretty emotional for me to write, actually. I am not always one that gets to that place where it's like, oh, I'm tearing up writing my own stories. But Maharia was one of them. There were several instances in that one that I got a little watery-eyed just getting the scene out. And the big scene that really got to me was Alden in one part where he talks about what it meant to him to be a father. And I just love that scene through and through.
Well, it wasn't when he was talking about being a father, but the whole Alden thing, I threw it across the room because of that one. I was like, Gary, you make me love this guy. He's a jerk.
I'm not giving you spoilers. I'm guessing you haven't read Skincutters' Daughter yet.
I have not, but it's on the top of my TBR because I want to see what happens with Alden. Because I knew it was about Alden, and I was like, yay! Oh, no spoilers.
Yeah.
But I wanted to read it.
It takes place about 17 years after Maharia, and Skincutters' Daughter is an intro, or it's the prelude to the Deathless series that I'm hoping to release later this year. But it does continue the story with Alden and Solana. So I'm pretty excited about that, but I imagine you'll be throwing those books as well.
I have to be honest. I don't want to read your books on Kindle because I know I'm going to
break your Kindle.
I want to read my Kindle. I need them in paperback, but I also want them in paperback because one of the things I love about you, Josh, is that you write these very in-depth, very emotionally drawing stories that are still mostly appropriate for younger audiences. Mm-hmm. And my kids are voracious readers. And my 17-year-old, we're really struggling because to get books that are on his reading level, they often contain content that I'm not ready for him to read because he's on the autism spectrum. And so he is 17 and he has a lot of things about him that is very typical 17-year-old. But on an emotional level, he's like 12. Like he reads the Hunger Games and he wants to be in the Hunger Games. And I'm like, you missed the whole point of that story, didn't you, honey? But for him to be able to read your stuff, and then my now 14-year-old, he actually just started the Thrice Nine Legends, the calendar series, and being able to say, yes, you can read this, and I don't have to worry about excessive gore. Okay, there's that one part, but I'm hoping he's slow enough that, but yeah, just being able to share the books with them and know that they're going to be reading something that's good, even through all the darkness, makes me really happy because we've been struggling with some of the other fantasy books lately.
Yeah. I'm echoing through somebody's microphone. I'm not sure whose. I really appreciate that. I know when I was younger, I was a pretty voracious reader myself, and I read pretty daunting novels like Lord of the Rings, and I read darker stuff like Vice Cop and stuff by Tom Clancy and John Grisham and stuff like that. And I didn't have a whole lot of trouble with that in just essentially devouring those books and understanding them. And I think it really helped me not only appreciate reading, but also appreciate writing and have a better understanding of the world around me. And I thought when I was writing these, I was really targeting that older adolescent to adult level that people could pick it up and not only have a good story, but have something that left them with some sort of, not necessarily a lesson, like I'm trying to push knowledge down your throat, but something to contemplate and see how that may impact their own life. And for teenagers especially, I want that. Now, I know there's some dark spots in the books where it does get a little bit darker than other areas. But even as a teenager, when I read books, I wasn't put off by that. It wasn't a terrible thing for me. But even with that being said, I still warn parents when they come to my booth and say, "What are your books about?" I say, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old. Usually it's like 15,
unless they're super mature.
Yeah, exactly. I say, there's some graphic battles in here. There's some moments of cannibalism. There's some what else? There's some torture scenes that take place in later books, and I think it's important for parents to know what their children may be reading about.
Moments of cannibalism.
Yeah. Well, and like one of the things I love about your books is that, and we talked about this when you and I were talking about the Hunter series, is that you're really great about not making judgments, and leaving it up to the reader. Like that's one of the things I love about Alden. Alden started out, I did not like Alden. He was an obnoxious
Alden didn't like Alden
character who I really didn't like. But then by the time you're done with the story, you understand why he does what he does, and he all of a sudden becomes a likable character. And then on the flip side of that, I can't even think of his name because he makes me so mad.
We're looking at Falmagan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Jerk.
He starts out like he's this good person, and he's trying to save the world, and then you by the end of the series you do not like him. And
wow, you and I picked up that totally different. I did not like Falmagan from the get-go.
Oh, see, I totally did. I mean, he was kind of arrogant, and he didn't treat his lower person. That should have been a clue to me. But he seemed like he was one of the good guys. And I saw Dorothy as kind of a
obnoxious troublemaker.
Yeah, I mean, like not as like your dirty old grandpa that you want to leave home, but you can't because
somebody's gonna care for this old guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan, but now I'm like, oh, you were playing us like Yoda. I see this now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just fun how you twist those perceptions of people in a way that makes people think without necessarily creating a judgment.
Well, and I wonder, I'm so interested in what you're going to think about Falmagan after you read Highborn Longwalker. And I know Rebekah's shared with me that her opinion has stayed pretty solidly the same. But with Falmagan, you get to see what has really twisted him and molded him into this being. And a lot of that for me comes back to my own career in working in social services and working with folks of all different types. And just another example, I had a reader message me the other day that they did not like Anarfel. They thought it was terrible. They hated the brothers. The brothers were spineless. They just thought that they were just the worst human beings ever and didn't have any sympathy for them one way or another. And I got into a conversation with them about abuse and neglect and how it impacts people, and how that those types of things are long lasting and come into adulthood and manifest in different ways. And and how the brothers themselves at multiple times don't even like themselves for what it is that they do, but it's almost like an addiction that they can't break away from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but at the same time, they never picked. They never went out on their own and did something nefarious just because they wanted to.
No, they didn't. But the same thing I've seen happen in social services where I've worked with children, 12 and 13 years old, who are a product of an environment that has been unhealthy for them. And they have picked up these negative coping behaviors that most of us would say, throw them away, lock away the key. This is awful. And I've heard professionals use the same words of these children are spineless. Why don't they just stop doing what they're doing and behave already, or stop doing what their parents taught them? And it's the same thing. They can't break away from it. And so it was trying to shine light on that. And you'll find with Val Maggin, as you go through his origin story, there's a lot of things that really brought him into this being. And it's not that I'm trying to victimize him. I'm just trying to say, look at it through a different lens.
Right. And that's one of the things I love too, because I totally felt for the brothers. I totally sympathized with the hating what you're doing, but it's the expectation that's been put on you. Mm. And I could totally relate to their pain and their struggle and not being able to break free of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that does not by any means
excuse what they did.
Give clearance for what they've done or the negative things that they do. That doesn't necessarily say that there shouldn't be consequences from it. But everything around Thrice 9 Legends goes back to this old belief that's not necessarily good and evil. It's more of action and consequence. And part of that comes through the mythology too. That Slavic mythology that the gods themselves weren't good or evil. They weren't right or wrong. They all had their purpose. They were all cogs in the wheel that made it turn, and they all had a function. And in Thrice 9 Legends, it's that same mentality that it's not necessarily right and wrong, good or evil. It's this, they all have a purpose, and they all have a function, and they all have actions, and they all have consequences.
Yep, and that's part of what I like about it too, definitely. Plus, it's really fun because I don't know about the rest of you, but I didn't grow up with Slavic myth.
No.
It's fun seeing this whole other cultural aspect that hasn't been beaten to death. The Greeks, just saying.
well, Slavic myth. A lot of the things Slavic were destroyed during the Crusades. They came through and burnt down the temples and burned the old manuscripts, and so there's only a few remnants that are actually left of what they believed. I think there's been more lately, especially with things like The Witcher coming out, where people are starting to piece things together to kind of have some cohesion around what the Slavs believed or the ancient Slavs believed. But a lot of it is really unknown. And so really all I've done is I've taken the gods, the monsters, the races, some of the legends and lore, and I've interwoven it through my world of Anar to really bring it to life. By no means is what I have, verbatim what the Slavs believed, but it at least adds a lot of flavor to the world.
Well, right. And that's Thor isn't exactly what
right.
But it gives you that introduction to that different cultural perception too, even if it is a little bit bastardized.
Yeah. That's a good word.
It's fun though. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And Thrice 9 Legends hopefully will never go away. And I think that's one of the reasons I'd like to see it get picked up for something bigger. I mean, of course, I've technically self-published Thrice 9. I would hate to get a deal with another publisher and they say, okay, you've already published these, leave them behind. Now you got to write something new for us. I'd like to see Thrice 9 get enough backing behind it that somebody comes along and says, you know what, there's already a fan base behind this. We can really build up on what you already got here. Let's make it a bigger name that's known in homes, all the way across the world. So that's what I'd like to see happen with it. Because in my mind, Thrice 9 Legends at some point should have 27 full-length novels that are a part of the saga. And that's what I'm aiming for. We're slowly building there.
Oh my gosh, you're going to keep me so busy reading for the rest of my life. Yay!
That's my hope. I don't want to retire from this. I enjoy it. I have so many ideas in my head about what I want to do. I mean, of course, I'm working on Death at Dusk right now. That's the book I'm currently writing. I have the Deathless series that is the next 3 main books that I want to write. But after that, I want to go back and tell the tale of Dorothy and his origins. And when the Carrion Council broke away from the Ninth Council, or the Ninth Council was created from the Carrion Council, and they broke away in Laerheim, when all the heretics, or all these people that cast this negative magic, were cast out of Laerheim into the world, and let people kind of get all that feel. I'm especially interested in the heretic piece. Of course, I know I'm talking for people who haven't read Thrice 9. It sounds like gibberish. But Nadezhda was an heretic. She cast this profane magic, this evil magic, where she was able to essentially, summon demons and do dark magic, and she could draw the life out of other people to make herself heal and remain young and all these different things. But the magic was so closely related to the magic of Marhina, which was rejected at the destruction of the Carian Council when they picked up Wolos as their god, that all the heretics were thrown out of the city. And so that's why there was all this crossbreeding that took place, and now we have the highborn that were born and all these things, is because all these people that had profane magic were cast out of the city and went and intermingled with the humans. And
I love it. I love it all.
Yeah. And Dorfe was the core of that. He wrote the Varkalok. He was part of the Carian Council. He left his stuff behind. And it wasn't that he was an heretic himself, but he disagreed with the direction they went because he was such a devout follower of Marhina that he cast himself out with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Y'all need to read this stuff because it is so much geeky fun.
Because he actually has holy magic.
Yeah, well, he actually has void magic.
Void magic, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, if you read in Maharia, he does have sacred magic. He's able to heal, but it's because of the dragon that he killed.
Yep.
He stole that dragon's essence to give himself holy magic.
Yep. I wasn't going to put that spoiler in. But...
Yeah.
Hey, if you want, I'm.
That's it. That's why. Yeah. That's what I just love Brandimir's reaction. Like, what?
Yeah. Oh, Bran's experience. Just. I love Bran.
He's so innocent in his understanding. Like, he just wants the best in people.
Yeah, and then going through the process and watching him. I guess I could relate a lot to Bran because I went through the same thing with my dad. When I was little, he was kind of like my end all be all, like every kid is with their dad.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I realized he wasn't really that great of a person.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned about, the trauma he went through as a kid and why he ended up the way he was. And I think it's really important for people to understand, like you were saying, it doesn't negate the bad things that my dad did. But when you understand why someone is the way they are, even though you don't agree with their actions, even though you don't agree with their behaviors, it's really hard to hate them.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't condone their behavior.
Oh, absolutely not. But it's still, it makes it hard to hate them.
Yeah, you can, and maybe forgiveness is a strong word, but you can forgive people without accepting them back into your life or accepting what they've done. You can understand and forgive and move on without essentially clinging onto that and letting it continue to taint your own path that you're walking on.
Exactly. And that's exactly how I felt about everything with my dad. He died a year ago last month, and we weren't on speaking terms, but I realized that I had forgiven him. He hadn't been in my life, but I didn't hold it against him. He did the best he could with what he had.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, my mom made better decisions for me, so I ended up okay. But at the end, I wasn't angry with him. I felt really sad for him that was his life.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just went super dark there.
No, that's okay. I think that's something that everyone can relate to. And that's I think one of the reasons. I mean, I of course have my own childhood trauma and own experiences too, which I think most people in the world do. And that's, I think, one of the things that probably comes out in my writing is that I try to give that all side perspective type of mentality when I put it out there, so that people can better understand that. Because most fights that I see that occur through people, not only my personal life, but also when I was doing practice with individuals in therapy, is it's always a lack of communication and a lack of understanding. They're just not really getting the words out there to see the other person's point of view, or they're refusing to see the other person's point of view. And I'm not necessarily preaching that all sides are right, but there's definitely some understanding that can take place in it.
Well, like they say, truth isn't her story or his story. It's what happens in between.
Oh, that's very wise.
Yep. Heidi is a very wise woman.
No, I get it from my mama. I still have quotes, and I would sound smart, but
Heidi has learned at the knee of a very wise woman. How about that?
That's right. That's right.
You know, I'm more than happy to give your mama a shout out too.
Yeah. She's up in Boise right now, having a good old time with her grandbabies. So I'm laughing about Robert over here in the comments.
What's he saying?
He says that Nadezhda is one of his favorite characters. He thinks she's just misunderstood. I completely agree with him on that. And he says
I'm not sure yet. I'm really curious as to whether or not she's going to turn out to be like a bad person, I suppose. But
I think Robert makes a good point. She comes across as a scapegoat. It's like they're using.
Oh, I mean, she's totally a scapegoat.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Robert on that.
But that doesn't mean that, I mean, because we have no clue how old she is. Maybe Josh knows, but I don't. You know, how old is she? You know, how twisted has all of this rejection made her become?
I'm so afraid to give away spoilers with Highborn Longwalker, mainly because I know Robert's in the middle of reading it right now. But there's a huge reveal between Nadezhda and who she is in relation to some of the other characters, or she most likely is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that one.
Which those that have read it, I mean, that is the true story behind it. And once you get into
it's true? That rumor was true?
Yeah. And you'll find that even when you go back and read Melkorka, you'll see that's why that other character, I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to give away the spoiler, but the character that other character has such a hard time interacting with her. Because if you go back, you'll see he has a hard time fighting her or raising a hand against her or all these things throughout Melkorka.
Oh my gosh, you just blew my brain.
Freaking
I have to go read everything now. Oh my gosh. Reread everything.
Which is the way that I try to write. Even Melkorka, those of you that read Melkorka and then you went and read Dying Dare, you go back to Melkorka and realize that a lot of it was double speak. What you read in that story you thought you read the first time was not what actually happened. It gave you a great story.
I went back through and read it chronologically again.
Mm-hmm.
And wow.
Yeah, because when you read Dying Dare, you're like, oh, what I read isn't actually what I read. I mean, the words were there, but it has a different meaning now that I know this. And you go back and it just comes across in a different way. So it's a great story both times, but you get new messages through the story every time you read it.
Which is why I keep telling people that you are probably the most brilliant writer I have ever read.
And that's why I love, the depth that you go into is absolutely amazing.
I appreciate it.
And then when you take into consideration how he wrote them, like he wrote, book 3 and then wrote book 1 so that it perfectly fits in with book 3 and everything lines up and it's like, wait, now I need to reread book 3.
Yeah, JC's giving me some trouble about that. He goes, he said essentially the same thing. He goes, I don't understand how you're able to go back and write books in between books, because he's very chronological in the way that he puts stuff down. It has to be chronological to make it make sense. And he goes, I don't know how you just jump back. He's like, all right, I'm gonna go write a book between these years and make it all fit together again. But for me, it's just like a piece of the puzzle.
And you keep doing it too, and it works perfectly. Like friggin' The Name of Death. How you fit the grandson in there perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And then that fits right in with Dying Dare.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wait, what?
And then you pick up Maharia, and of course you have the same characters coming back, which it all flows there as well. And right now, I really don't know why I do this to myself. It's probably some sort of mental illness they haven't figured out yet. But Death at Dusk is even more complex because it takes place about 8 months after Tyr and Isleave leave from When Blood Falls, and they come together. So they've just joined on to the Crimson Sun. It comes on just about 8 months or so after Farther and Sigfield have come out of the deep after Sigfield rescued Farther, and they've now are over on the Crimson Sun. It comes right before you have Theodore, who's been sent to find this dagger, and of course his father is still over it running the Thieves Guild, or the Guardians of Yarrow, in Eldhaft, and so he's the leader of the Crimson Sun. So you have this band of Tyr, Isleave, Sigfield, Farther, and who am I missing? Tyr. And it's essentially this band of these 5 Crimson Sun people that are all coming with these very complex backstories that you got in these other books, and now they're working together to essentially work against the Assassin's Guild or the Dusk Legion, which we're going to be introduced to all these new characters that will be taking on the new series in the Deathless series. So you have
It's freaking amazing.
Bryn and Krell and all these other people. But of course, if you read Skincutter's Daughter, you've already met Bryn, but that's about 20 years after this book. So you're seeing him as an older gentleman in Skincutter's Daughter. This is when he's young and fiery.
Yeah, I can't wait to read about him.
Yeah, and it's so much fun because this you're going to really get to see the new technology of weapons too from the human's perspective, and you get to dive into the actual politics that take play in Maharia between the 4 different kingdoms, because there are 4 different kingdoms of men that are constantly shifting power between them. And for the Lone Myrians, which is where the Dusk Legion is at, they've been constantly trying to overthrow the Catanian kingdom or the king. And in Eldhaft, where the thieves are at, it's been the primary source that's kept them from doing that. So you really get to dive into the actual human world and what's going on with them, which plays a huge piece coming into the Deathless series. Because by now, I can't give away spoilers, by now, what's taking place in the first 9 books has essentially come to a conclusion with Hey Sheol being published. And so with that coming to a conclusion, this ventures into a whole nother issue, specifically with Cowan in the world when you get into the Deathless series.
You know, what this all reminds me of is, did you ever read the Star Wars books that were published after the movies came out, the first movies came out?
I sadly have never read a Star Wars book.
This totally reminds me of that, except those were written by fans to fill in other pieces of the story. And then, of course, they were approved by, the team. But you and JC are doing the fans' work, basically. So which makes it even better because it's more consistent and it all links together much more nicely than when the fans do it and might have different views from each other of how things are. So it's really cool.
I will say that I have tried to get Hawkhurst Saga opened up on Kindle World so that fans could write in that, but I was not successful in doing that. Which, of course, that's a whole nother fantasy world. But
yeah.
Well, one of the things I have a hard time with, and I had this problem with the Dragon Rider series too, when you could tell when fans took over the writing. And you're like, oh, wait, no, this doesn't really jive with, the way that it was laid out originally. And I had a really hard time with that. And so if you were to do that, I hope that you would take a little more creative control and make sure that it sticks to. And I think you have the capacity. I know I would never be able to do that because I would get reading and I'd be like, oh, this is a really good story. Oh, I totally forgot that Hermione Granger's name is a different name in book 2. In book 4, whatever.
I really worry about that.
Details.
I seriously worry about that a lot now, especially now that Thrice 9 Legends has gotten so big that I'm going to forget just one minute detail somewhere in another book, and I'm going to get somebody's eye color wrong or something, and everyone's just going to hamper me on it. Be like, what happened? Why has it changed? What's the secret meaning in here? Like, oh, I just forgot.
I can't see you doing that though, just with all the stuff that you've already managed to do so beautifully. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think my kids are going to love this series because they're they're super fanboy geeks. I don't know where they got that from. It couldn't possibly be better. But I'm a weird geek because I love fan stuff, but I am not. I can't keep all the details. That's not something that I'm good at. And my kids, they're like right now we're going through Bleach. And they read all of the manga and they're watching the show and they're comparing the show to the manga and they're going and getting fan art and they're going and getting these fanfic stories that are up on Wattpad, which, oh my gosh, y'all, you have to be so careful letting your kids on Wattpad. I learned
yes, you do.
There is some really inappropriate Bleach fanfic out there. I'm just saying.
Oh, wow.
But, they're and so I totally want to see them geek out with this. And I like the idea because I know it's safe. It's appropriate material up till now. So again, I just want to hammer that home for parents. Yeah, it is for older teens, but if you're one of those parents that you don't want your kids reading about a lot of sex and a lot of, gratuitous violence, I would say yes, there is a lot of violence, but none of it is gratuitous, and all of it drives home for me anyway, the negativity of violence and the harm that violence does to people. And that's one of the things I absolutely have to. And Andy Peliquin does the same thing, but he goes into a lot more detail than you do. And so I'm not ready for my kids to read Andy's books yet.
I've had both positives and negatives about my writing. I honestly don't like giving too much detail. I like to give just enough to let your imagination wander and let you fill in the blanks. And hopefully I achieve that okay. But I've never been one of those people that I like to give a lot of detail in the text. I like to let the dialogue do most of the storytelling.
Yeah. And I actually think that's part of why that's why I love reading versus watching movies. Because in movies, you don't get that. But in books, you do. But the downside of that, I will just say, there is a very traumatic death that happens in Calendar series that I will not talk about because I'm not going to do spoilers. But oh my gosh, it was so much more traumatic for me because you didn't give all the details. And my mind went to the absolute worst possible version of it. I went back and read it again because that was the scene that made me go, I'm not ready for my kids to read this book yet. But then I went back and read it again after I'd calmed down. I was like, you know what? That really wasn't that bad. Heidi, you're a puppy.
I honestly wonder how many people go through that same experience that you talk about, because I have a lot of people be like, oh man, this book was just way too graphic for me, and they give me all this feedback, and I go back and read it, I go, I don't think that was that graphic. I don't really understand what was it, and maybe it's just it's enough to let their imagination wander. They think that they're seeing more than they actually are.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's definitely what happened with that one character. And I was very emotionally attached to him. That was really hard too, so it seemed more traumatic.
He will be in Death at Dusk, by the way.
Do what?
He will be in Death at Dusk.
He's coming back.
Yeah, him and Hannah both. Yep. This takes place during the time when they're both have been commissioned and they're heading off to the war.
Yeah, that's honestly, it's going to be really rough to read because of that.
It'll be more of a cameo, but it'll essentially be like them in passing, interacting with the other characters and moving on. So.
Oh, you're a tease. You need to do a whole book just about him. No,
I do. I have a plan for a book about him. I do. Because I feel like I'm giving you guys so many spoilers. Adamus is not just human.
I kind of figured that.
His father was Uval.
Did not see that one. Never mind. Wow.
Yeah, but that's awesome. Didn't. See, this is why you guys love us. We bring you the awesome
that
extras.
So much.
That's why he knows the dark magic and he can speak to the dead and dying dare and all that, is because that's part of his heritage. Because the Uval speak to their dead to understand prophecy and know what they're going to do, and that's Adamus's heritage. Yep.
Wow.
I want a whole book just on Adamus.
Someday I will end up getting there.
I will wait for it. So happily wait for it.
Have you guys ever read the Dragonlance series? Any of them?
Yep. All of them.
Okay, so everyone knows then Raistlin, the mage. Yeah, my goal in Death at Dusk is to make a mage that is cooler than Raistlin.
Good luck.
The guy that I have is Rahor, which you read about in Skincutter's Daughter, but you never actually see. But he is an heretic like Nadezhda. He's just extremely gifted at it because he also dabbles in poisons. And so he has an herb pouch that he carries around with him everywhere that he goes. And he can just whip up the craziest stuff in terms of antidotes and poisons and things that do different things. But he is also the original bearer of Fagrim.
Wow.
And so you see where Fagrim comes from in the story as well, and how Eisleaf gets it.
Oh, gosh. Sorry, I'm totally geeking out over here.
Write more faster.
Yeah, he's also a little. He's got a dirty tongue, so he's not the most appropriate guy to have. Everything comes down to a sex joke by the end of any conversation that he has, but he's pretty fabulous.
So basically, it's the male version of Rebekah.
Well, it's funny because I'll just give you one part of a scene. There's one scene where they're engaging with a Jarl, but they can't let the Jarl remember that they were there talking to him. So he's able to put together one of his concoctions that essentially you drink and it makes you forget your past day. It's a poison that he knows how to make. And they don't even have to force it down the Jarl's throat because he has Fagrim. So he just can make the Jarl drink it himself because he can control his mind. Like that's how.
Yeah, it's called tequila.
Yeah. Yeah, this guy's just incredibly.
I know this
dangerous.
recipe.
Yeah, the guy is just incredibly dangerous. Not only does he have access to Koldovstavo and this really dark magic, but he has the Fagrim and he does poisons too. So he's tons of fun.
All your characters are fun, honestly.
I try to, but I don't know how much time we have left. That was the most difficult thing for me in terms of writing, was learning how to write unique characters. I for years wrote characters that all were the same on the page. They may have had a different hair color, eye color, whatever, but they all came across exactly the same with the same fundamental belief system and the same talking patterns, and they were just dull. And it took me a long time to figure out how to really spice it up.
Oh, that is so hard to imagine. That really is. Especially because even with the brothers being so much alike, I never had any problem telling who was telling the story at the time, even without the names being mentioned. And that's one of the things that I hate on Girl on the Train. Sorry, I'm going to bring it up. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. But for me, reading Girl on the Train, I couldn't tell who was telling the story at which time, because the three women that you see the story points from are basically the same person. Oh, there's alcohol. Oh, that's the main character. Never mind. I know. That was the only difference between them, really. And so,
I think it's something that most writers, fight with and work against when they get started.
I think it is. I think it's even things that
you only have one point of view in your life, so that's where all your characters come from. You really got to grow into it.
Yeah.
To start writing different people and understanding different people in order to write them.
And I think that some writers may be able to envision their own character differently, and so they hear it differently in their head or see it differently in their head. But also finding the way to use a language to really bring it to life on paper is really complicated. I mean, you have to really know how to structure your words and how to get the dialogue tags right, and what quirks your character has about them that you can use to really make them come out of their shell so that readers can experience them in the same way that you do.
Just, don't get repetitive with it, like she tugs her braid.
Oh,
hopefully everyone got that reference.
Anne quirks her eyebrow all the time.
Yep.
I might have been a little excessive, but yeah, anybody seen me in video, there's a reason that I'm a little excessive about that.
So I'll give you another hidden thing. I love JC. I have him read through about everything before I publish it because he helps me.
That.
Yeah, he helps me make a lot of stories better. But he's very blunt in he's very blunt in what I do really badly, and he's not afraid to just call me out on it and use the foulest language he can find in order to tell me how terrible I am. But at the first edition of Melkorka, one of the things that Dorothy did all the time was lick his lips. He would always lick his lips before he before he would do something. And so
there's a lot of naughty stuff.
He would be like, "Why is he licking his damn lips so much? Like, are they that dry?"
He was old and dry mouthed, and he's an alcoholic.
But it was like 27 times in the book he'd licked his lips and before he said something. JC's like, "Oh, here we go. Got to wetting these babies up before we say anything." And it would be hilarious, his commentary on it. But I gave him the same trouble in Strong Arm because he had everyone hitting a horse's ass like all the time. And so It kept
There's
pulling me out of the
something
story. I was like,
very
why is and it would even be the centaur that was hitting the horse on the ass that was pulling the cart for Sin Sam. And so I was like, why does he keep slapping the horse's rump? Like, is he just miss his wife? What's happening here?
I thought that was obvious.
Lillian says, "Can't a man lick his lips in peace?"
But it's pretty funny. Our commentary to one another when we edit each other's stuff is pretty vulgar. I mean, we'll just be like, what the shit was that? Like, delete all of that. Start over. So we have a lot of fun with it, but we push each other to become better.
Yeah.
I thought Mike's editing was hilarious. You two sound even better at it.
JC's much better at it. His snark comes through pretty strong when he edits stuff. and it's pretty much like WTF comments all the way through. And he doesn't really even give you feedback on what to change. He just is like, WTF, Josh. Like, what are you even saying here? Delete that.
Okay, so we're almost up with time, but I want to ask a question for the big fans out there and see if we can get an answer. In Annerfell, there's two brothers. Drast, who tends to be the more outgoing and interesting one, and why did I just blank?
Tyrion.
Tyrion, thank you. Curious fans want to know which of you is Drast and which of you is Tyrion.
So when we came up with the idea of Annerfell, the idea was that we were going to write two brothers that were roughly based on each one of us. And so Drast was going to be me, and Tyrion was going to be JC. And I was supposed to write Drast, and he was supposed to write Tyrion. And in doing that, we found out that we were really terrible in trying to talk about ourselves. So instead, after several months of failure, we swapped places. And we decided that Drast was still me, but JC was going to write me and pull all the worst habits of my own and just essentially make them times 1,000 to really bring them off the page. And I was going to write.
Every time Drast grins when he's mad, I picture you, Josh.
Oh yeah, that's me. My mother will tell you that. And and I was going to write Tyrion, but Tyrion with JC, and I was going to find every worst possible thing about JC and just elevate it times 1,000. And that's what we ended up doing. Now it wasn't.
Mumble under his breath a lot?
He does. He grunts a lot. You call him and ask him a question, he just kind of grunts at you, and you're like, I don't know what that means. And he goes, oh, I thought I responded. I guess that was just in my head.
I'm sorry, so hard right now. So what you're saying is that this writing exercise has been great therapy for you guys, huh?
It has. Well, what it ended up coming to be, I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression who's read the book. It got to the point that the characters eventually took a life of their own. They eventually got pulled so far away from either one of us that it really wasn't us at all anymore. But it gave us a good starting point to really build them up. But it originally was written that way. And so I wrote, Tyrion's chapters, he wrote Drast chapters, and then we went back and we edited the other person's chapters and added our own language and our own feel into it so that the entire story blended it smoothly.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. I didn't even realize that there were two writers. I mean, I knew going into it, but I got so into the story that I didn't, it doesn't feel like sometimes when you read books that are written by two authors, you get a distinct difference in the voices, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you didn't get that. There was consistency in the scene descriptions and all of that stuff in between, with each character still having their own unique voice. So I honestly forgot while I was reading it that there were two different writers.
Yeah, and that's what we wanted. We were afraid that it would sound too far apart from one another. And so that's why we went to the efforts that we did to try to make sure that it blended well, and hopefully Hey Sheol did the same thing. For folks that have read that, hopefully it's the same blending that you really can't tell that there's two writers there at all.
I have to be perfectly honest. I'm particularly cognizant of that because my brother and I tried to write a book together, and it didn't go as well as you guys did with yours.
It took us a long time to do it, Heidi. I mean, you got to remember, we started writing Annerfell in 2002. And we fought about it for like years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, my brother and I, we made it 6 months. I was like, I love you too much. I can't do this. Go and we'll be amazing together, separate.
Yeah, it took us years to figure out how we were going to write that story together. Yeah, but eventually we got a process down, which works better. But the funny thing is, or the cool thing is that I like those, that if you read Blood and Bile, which is the first book in JC's world, the writing is completely different than Anarfell. Like you would almost think that the book was written by two other authors completely. I think anyway.
So good. We definitely need more books from his world.
Yeah, we're working on the next 2 this summer. We already have them both plotted out and ready to go. We just have to. I got to finish Death at Dusk. He's already started writing. He finished his short story for the Thrice Nine Legends collection, and I got mine done as well. So here in the next month or so, we will have the collection out of all 6 short stories in paperback form for people to put on their shelves. And then it'll be Death at Dusk, and then it'll be the 2 books in the Legacy series.
Because my husband is actually champing at the bit to get the rest of them.
Oh, for the Blood and Bile stuff?
Well, he definitely wants more Blood and Bile. He actually, I don't think I have that one in paperback, so he only skimmed it.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't read ebooks unless he's deployed. So when he's home, he sits down with the paperback. And
Blood and Bile's been. I've almost sold.
I haven't purchased it yet.
I've honestly almost sold out of them. Blood and Bile has been so popular lately. So many people have went after it.
Didn't he buy one from you at the con?
I think he did. That
means the wanker walked off. He hid it someplace.
But the writing style in Blood and Bile is different, which I get from people. They're very amazed that I have books that are, and even Hawkhurst Saga is written differently than the other 2 worlds as well. And that's something that I've gotten a lot of feedback on, is that they're just written different. You can't even tell it's the same author.
Yeah, and I get that with mine too. There's a lot of people that are like, "This is totally different." I was like, "Well, it's a totally different genre, so of course it's different."
Yeah.
Story, it's a different world. It should be different. I don't like when, that's one of the things I've struggled with. What's his name? He writes the Dark Pit series. I absolutely love the Dark Pit series, and had tons of fun with that. But then he wrote another one. I can't remember the name of it now. But I was like, so basically this is just Dark Pit, only he's blonde. It feels like the same story. And that made me sad. So
yeah, I've read I'm not going to mention them out loud. But I know what you're talking about, Heidi. I've read fantasy novels by the same authors, and the characters were different, but they essentially followed the same character arc. It was the exact same character, just different hair color and eye color, or even a different gender, but it was the same issue they were battling through. And so it was like, I already know how this goes.
And I don't mind so much with that, because Dirk Pitt, I mean, other than a few little fun pieces, it was always the same story. Dirk ends up investigating something that has nothing to do with the water because he's a curious little bastard, and that's what's fun. And he ends up finding himself in the middle of some political intrigue that has some weird conspiracy theory element that's fun. And that's fine, to do that with Dirk Pitt every series. But then this whole other series with this whole other character who is exactly like Dirk Pitt, and I'm just like, I like Dirk Pitt better. Sorry. I can't. Yeah, that was hard for me. But yeah, I think that diversity of being able to develop the character, even if it's in the same genre, it still should feel like a different world,
Well, and there's so many options up there. I mean, we always hear the argument that every story's already been written type of thing. But I had a conversation with several people, but recently with somebody about how I always start with the theme. That's always the starting place for my novel, is what theme I want to do. And then I build my characters around the theme. And that's how I build my novel process. And I don't know that everybody does that. I think some people just sit down and just start writing the character, and naturally they come out in a way that is most comfortable with the author, which is sometimes the same story.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, the writing world is better off for you, and I hope more and more people find you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Heidi.
Because I need more people to talk to. about all of the awesome books that you're writing.
I like talking to other people who have read it because, like we were talking at the beginning, everyone gets something slightly different from it.
Mhm.
Yes, and
Everyone
that's
sees the characters slightly different.
For me, that's exciting because I want that to happen. And, you know, you need the audience behind the books to know if you've really achieved that.
Yep, absolutely. So for those of you who haven't gotten into the Thrice Nine Legends series yet, Josh, tell them where they can find you.
So the easiest way to find me is robertsonwrites.com. That's robertsonwrites.com. You can find all my social links through there. My books are now available anywhere that books are sold. So Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Nook, you name it, you can find it. You can also call your public libraries or your local bookstores and ask them to order any of my books, which is super helpful. So I definitely condone that type of behavior. And all it takes is a phone call. It's free for you. Just call your library and say, order Joshua Robertson's books.
Yep. And for those of you who don't know, Josh has an awesome YouTube channel you should totally check out because we all love to giggle about his waggling eyebrows. Just
I do have a YouTube channel, and I have just recently started doing Twitch as well. I've been doing gaming probably more often than I should, about 3 or 4 times a week over there, but that's been tons of fun.
I'm going to have to tell my son about that because he's really into Twitch channels and watching gamers. So
I've actually been playing on there with my other brother, my youngest brother. So him and I have been co-streaming together over there. So it's been kind of fun. So if you want to get the full humor of the Robertson family.
There you go. And y'all, it is so much fun. It really is. It's kind of like supernatural and fantasy joy and crazy happiness all rolled into one. I absolutely love following the Robertson family.
Thank you so much, Heidi.
All right. I hate to be that person, but it is the top of the hour. So Rebekah, do you want to go ahead and take us out?
Yeah, I forgot how I take people out of the how I end the show. But I also forgot how to.
Heidi, we're still on the air. That's true.
I know. That's how it always ends. Heidi, you forgot to hit the stop button. No.
Yeah, that's how it ends after everyone has done their outros. Okay. Well, it's been a blast. Josh, obviously, we're really happy to finally have you on here. I don't know why we didn't have you on earlier. I think it's because
It's because he's been so busy with the stupid cons. I mean, the amazing cons. That's what it is.
It's been busy, but I really appreciate being on here. It's been a lot of fun.
Actually, now I remember why. I have, in fact, thought about it like every month, and then, but you're so good at posting your schedule, I always knew that you were too busy. What was I going to do? Interrupt your writing time? I think not.
We need more books, man.
I'm trying hard. I think I've had 3 releases so far, and I still have 2 more coming out in the next month. So maybe 3 in the next 60 days.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Like I said, you're one of the authors that can actually like straight up feed my addiction. Like, I love the indie book world so much. You guys write so fast. I've got like 6 of you that basically keep me fed.
Yep, true story.
And considering, I read a book a day. Heidi, do you realize I've already read 70 books this year?
I can't even talk to you. You're just making up for how bad my reading has been.
Oh, you love it because you can always come to me and say, hey, so what happens in this book?
Yep.
And you can usually get an answer.
Yep, I do. Is this one I want to bother sitting down and reading? Yep.
Oh, yeah, we were supposed to be closing out.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. We had a ton of fun, as always. I was supposed to tell you guys about my book that comes out in a little less than 2 weeks, but, well, I had a lot more fun talking about what I was talking about. So check out my page. You can find me at Rebekah Jonesy at Blogspot. Heidi, you want to give your outro?
Yes, you guys can find me at Heidi Angell And just so you guys know, I did just post a review on Moss and Clay, which is Rebekah's book that is coming out. And it also has the links to all the exciting stuff that's going on with her tour. You guys, it is going to be absolutely amazing. Next Saturday is the Facebook event, so be sure to come over and check it out. Just look up Moss and Clay on Facebook, and you will find that event. It's absolutely amazing. And until next time, keep reading.
Yeah, today's stop on my tour is a really, really funny one with Drew. So you guys find us on Facebook and look that one up because it's really funny, and I'm already getting yelled at for it. Heidi, if you haven't read it, you need to because you're a superhero.
Oh, honey, I totally read it. And yes, I am totally the Red Pen Heidi. Heidi Red Pen Angel. Yes, I did read that.
Okay, and Amanda?
I am
You haven't said
Amanda,
much?
A.L. Mabry, dark fiction and fantasy writer. You can find anything and everything about me on my website, authoralmabry.com, including all my social media links and the information about my latest book that came out in March, Darker Days.
Yay.
Yay.
And until next time, guys.
Subscribe, be sassy.
Read well and prosper. Heidi, that's your cue.